What would you do if a stranger's child fixed your car and turned out to be your family? The heat hit different that day. Not just hot, sticky, like the air itself was holding a grudge. It was the kind of heat that made you question every decision you'd made up to that moment, especially when your prized '67 Mustang decided it was done for the day. Grant Ellison stood on the shoulder of a faded two-lane road outside of Macon, Georgia, staring into the hood like it had just insulted his mama. Steam hissed from somewhere deep inside, and every time he wiped sweat from his brow, more replaced it instantly. His once crisp button-up clung to his back like wet paper. He grumbled and yanked at a hose, then cursed under his breath when it snapped loose and splashed grime on his loafers. Grant wasn't a bad man, just tired. Tired of noise, of people, of being needed. After selling 3 dealerships and his name being on half the classic car circles in Georgia, he'd slipped into quiet, retired before 60 with enough money to live twice. But money can't jump a battery or fix a busted radiator out in the middle of nowhere. And today, there was no driver, no assistant, no phone service. Just him, a lifeless Mustang, and a whole lot of heat. He leaned on the side of the car, exhaling slowly. The pine trees swayed in the distance like they were mocking him, and the nearest gas station was about 4 miles back. He wasn't walking that far in this heat. That's when he heard it. A rustle. Not a car, not footsteps, just a soft, curious kind of movement. Like someone was trying to decide whether to step forward or stay hidden. "Hello?" he called out, lifting his head. "Somebody out there?" Silence. Then, out of the sun and weeds came a little girl. She was small, couldn't be more than 9. Barefoot, with dark skin that shined in the sun, and a pair of denim overalls 2 sizes too big. Her hair was tucked beneath a floppy sun hat that had seen better years, and she walked with that hesitant confidence only kids have, like she was curious but still ready to bolt. "Your car's smoking," she said plainly, nodding toward the Mustang. Grant squinted. "Yeah, I noticed." "You ain't got no water in it," she added, walking right up to the hood without asking. "That hose done popped off." Grant blinked. "You know about cars?" "My pawpaw used to fix 'em. Taught me a little 'fore he passed." She leaned over the engine and sniffed. Actually sniffed. "Ain't just the water. Smells like your radiator's clogged too. You got a screwdriver?" He didn't move, just stared. "Well?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, glove box." Without waiting for permission, she popped open the door, rummaged, and pulled out a flathead screwdriver with both hands like it was a sword. "Give me 10 minutes, she said, already rolling up her sleeve. But Grant didn't move. Because something about this kid, the way she carried herself, the way she talked, it was like she'd been here before. And he couldn't look away. She worked like she meant it. Bent over the open hood, elbows deep in grease and steam. That little girl wasn't just poking around. She was fixing things. The screwdriver clicked and clanked against metal while her fingers moved quick, smart, like she wasn't guessing. Grant leaned on the passenger side, arms folded, just watching. His mind couldn't make sense of it. She wasn't timid. She didn't fumble. And she definitely wasn't asking for help. "You got a name?" he finally asked, squinting under the brim of his sweat-soaked cap. "Zariah," she said without looking up. "Zariah Coleman." "You from around here?" She nodded toward a field across the road. "That peach stand right over there? That's my grandma. I help her sell when I ain't in school." Grant looked over and spotted a crooked table under a sun-faded tarp. A cooler sat next to a cardboard sign that just said, "Peaches, $4 a bag." Behind it sat an older woman in a lawn chair, fanning herself with a church bulletin. "Your folks all right with you walking up to strange men by the road?" Zariah didn't flinch. "You ain't strange. You just look annoyed and stuck. Ain't the same thing." That made Grant chuckle, actually chuckle, for the first time in what felt like weeks. "You always this sharp?" "Only when I'm hungry." She grunted, twisted the screwdriver with a bit more force, then stepped back and wiped her hands on the front of her overalls. "That should hold for now," she said, exhaling. "Your clamps rusted through, though. Won't last long." Grant stepped over, cautiously eyeing her work. "You sure you're 9? "Pretty sure." He didn't know what else to say, so he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a crisp 50. "Here, for the help." Zariah glanced at the bill but didn't take it. "Don't want your money. You earned it. I ain't fixing it for money. Then what are you fixing it for? She shrugged. Just seemed like you needed somebody. People always passing each other like they invisible. I don't like that. For a second, he didn't say anything. Then quietly he asked, Your grandma teach you that? Zariah hesitated. Nah, my granddad. He always said, help folks who ain't asking. They the ones who need it most. Grant lowered his hand, still holding the 50, and put it back. He sounds like a good man. He was. There was a pause between them. The sound of cicadas buzzed in the distance, and the radiator gave a little spit, like it was testing her patch job. Zariah reached up and straightened her hat. That's when he noticed it. Pinned to the front of her overalls, tarnished but still catching the sun, was a gold brooch in the shape of a dove. 2 tiny emerald stones sat where the eyes should have been. Grant's chest tightened, his breath caught. He took a step closer. Where'd you get that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked down, then touched it gently with her fingers. This? It was my mama's. She died when I was little. Grandma let me keep it. His eyes didn't leave the brooch. That brooch. That exact one. I had it made for my mother, nearly 40 years ago. Zariah frowned. You sure? I don't forget things I pay $5,000 for. That brooch was one of a kind. But before he could say another word, the old woman from the peach stand stood up, like she'd heard something she wasn't ready to face, and started slowly walking across the road. Grant didn't speak. He just stared, jaw set, eyes locked on that brooch, like it was whispering secrets. Zariah looked between him and her grandma, who was now crossing the road with a stiffness in her step that said she wasn't surprised, just tired of pretending. Her name was Ruth Coleman, and you could tell by the way she walked that she wasn't someone to mess with. Gray streaks framed her tight braid, and her expression didn't change, not even when she stopped in front of Grant. I figured this day might come, she said, not wasting time on pleasantries. Grant's voice was low and sharp. Where'd you get that brooch? Ruth didn't flinch. Why don't you tell me why it matters? It matters because I had that piece made for my mama when I was 25. No one else had one like it. Zariah looked up at her grandmother, confused. Granny? Ruth let out a long breath and finally met Grant's eyes. That brooch belonged to your sister. The words hit like a punch. Grant blinked, like he hadn't heard her right. My what? Ruth turned to Zariah. Baby, go grab me a peach from the cooler. The soft one. Zariah hesitated. But... Now, sweetheart. She left without another word, sneakers thumping the dry earth as she ran back toward the stand. Once she was out of earshot, Ruth turned back to Grant. Your sister's name was Lenora. She left home when she was 17. Said she couldn't take the pressure anymore. Your father, your mother, that big fancy house. She needed air. Grant's face twisted. Lenora ran away. We looked for her. Nobody could find her. She didn't want to be found, Ruth said calmly. She ended up here in Georgia. Met my son, Tyrone. They were together for a while, had a little girl. That girl was Zariah's mama. Silence. You're lying, Grant said, but it came out weak. Ruth reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a faded Polaroid. It was bent at the corners, but the image was still clear. A young woman with warm brown eyes, high cheekbones, and the same stubborn tilt in her chin as Zariah. I took this the day before she passed, Ruth said softly. She always kept that brooch pinned to her dress. Said her brother gave it to her once when she was little, and she never let it go. Grant reached out with a shaking hand and took the photo. He stared at it, his face hard to read, but his eyes gave him away. She's gone, he whispered. Ruth nodded. Zariah never knew her. We told her as much truth as she could handle. But now was different. Zariah came skipping back with a peach in her hands. It's real soft, Granny, just like you asked. Ruth took it and smiled gently. Thank you, baby. Then she turned to Grant. You want to help fix something? Start with what's broken in you. That girl's got half your blood, whether you like it or not. Grant looked at Zariah again, really looked at her. He saw it now. The shape of her nose, the way her eyebrows dipped when she was curious, that tilt in her smile. He handed her the screwdriver back. You ever think about fixing more than cars? Zariah tilted her head. Like what? Like, maybe helping old men get their heads on straight. She giggled. You sound like you've broken the head already. He smirked. Probably. But before either of them could say more, a white truck pulled onto the shoulder behind the Mustang, and out stepped a man in a crisp sheriff's uniform, already eyeing the situation like something wasn't adding up. The sheriff was a stocky man, maybe mid-50s, with skin tanned deep by years in the Georgia sun, and a look that said he didn't believe in coincidences. The badge on his chest read Sheriff Wendell Price, and he moved with that slow, deliberate walk that made people talk fast before he even said a word. He eyed the scene. A stalled-out Mustang, a black child holding a screwdriver, a wealthy white man sweating through his shirt, and an elderly woman standing firm between them. You folks all right? He asked, chewing his words like they owed him money. Grant wiped his palms on his pants. Car overheated. The girl helped me out. Price's eyes flicked to Zariah. She your mechanic now? Grant stepped forward. She's my family. It slipped out before he could stop it. The word tasted strange but solid in his mouth. Ruth glanced at him but didn't interrupt. The sheriff tilted his head. That so? Yeah, Grant nodded, firmer this time. This girl, Zariah, is my niece's daughter. Just met her, but there's no mistake. The sheriff didn't look convinced. You got ID? Grant pulled out his wallet and handed it over. Price studied it, then looked at Ruth. You know him? I know of him, she said. Didn't expect to see him standing on this road, but I know who he is. The sheriff muttered. He looked back at Zariah. You help fix that car, little lady? Zariah nodded. Used a screwdriver and some string. Price cracked a smile, small but real. You're gonna make some mechanic real nervous one day. Zariah grinned. Satisfied, Price handed the ID back to Grant. Well, long as everybody's breathing and nobody's been kidnapped, I'll be on my way. Just don't stall out again, or next time I'm charging a towing fee. Grant gave him a nod. Appreciate it, Sheriff. Price tipped his hat and walked back to the truck. It pulled off in a spray of gravel, leaving the road hot and quiet again. Zariah turned to Grant. Why'd you say I was your family? He looked at her, then at Ruth. Because you are. I didn't know before. I didn't want to know anything after my sister left. I thought she abandoned us. Ruth's eyes softened. She didn't. She just couldn't breathe in that house no more. Your daddy never forgave her for wanting a life that didn't have marble floors and antique rugs. Grant nodded slowly. He never talked about her after she left, like erasing her would fix the shame. She wasn't the shame, Ruth said. He was. Silence settled over them again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was like the air was finally clearing. Zariah looked down at the brooch again. My mama wore this all the time, Granny says. Said it made her feel safe. Grant kneeled down in front of her, really seeing her. I gave that to Lenora when she was a little girl. She wore it to every piano recital. Used to call it her magic bird. Zariah's eyes lit up. Magic bird? Yeah, she believed if she wore it, nothing bad could happen. Maybe she was right. Zariah smiled and gently pressed the brooch against her chest. But before the moment could settle too long, Ruth cleared her throat and said, if you really believe she's your family, then don't just say it standing here. Prove it when it matters. The sun was beginning its slow crawl toward the tree line, casting long shadows over the cracked road. The heat hadn't let up, but now it carried a weight instead of a burn, like the air was waiting for someone to finally tell the truth. Grant stood, brushing the dust off his knees. Ruth, he said carefully, why didn't you tell me? She looked at him sideways. Tell you what? You knew who I was. You knew about the brooch. You had to know I was Lenora's brother. Why'd you never reach out? Ruth folded her arms and took her time answering. Because she didn't want me to, she said. Your sister asked me not to call you, not to tell you where she was, not to write. She was afraid. Grant's brow furrowed. Afraid of what? Ruth looked him dead in the eye. That you'd try to fix her instead of love her. Those words hit harder than he expected. She said you were always the fixer, the favorite, the one who followed the rules, the one who made your father proud. She didn't want a lecture. She wanted peace. He looked down at the pavement, jaw tight. I thought she hated me. She didn't, Ruth said. She missed you, all the time. She just couldn't go back to that house. Zariah stood off to the side now, silent, watching. She didn't understand everything, but she felt the tension. Grant rubbed the back of his neck. She had a daughter, a life. I missed all of it. Life ain't a checklist, Ruth said. You don't get points for showing up at the end. But if you do show up, really show up, you better mean it. He glanced toward Zariah. I don't know how to make it right. Start with a ride, Ruth said. Her school starts next Monday. Bus don't come out this far. You want to help? Wake up early. Pick her up. Meet her teacher. Show her she matters. Zariah perked up. I get a ride in the Mustang? Grant smiled. Only if she starts in the morning. This patch job's not going to last through the weekend. Ruth chuckled. There's a mechanic over in Warner Robins. Owes me a favor. Tell him Ruth Coleman sent you. He'll get you straight. Grant looked back at the old car and sighed. She's been good to me, but she's stubborn. She ain't the only one, Ruth said. They both laughed, just a little. Then Grant turned back to Zariah. Would you want that? To see me more? Zariah tilted her head. You got snacks? I can have snacks. Like the real kind. Not the healthy stuff. Deal. She grinned and stuck out her pinky. No raisins. He hooked his pinky with hers. No raisins. It was a small thing, but sometimes small things open big doors. But just as Ruth turned back toward the stand, Grant's phone lit up in the car, finally catching a signal, and with it came a name he hadn't seen in years, his father's lawyer. Grant stared at the screen. The name pulsed like it was alive. Lloyd Reinhardt, attorney. A man he hadn't spoken to since the funeral, his father's funeral. He didn't pick up right away. Instead, he sat on the cracked leather of the front seat, door still open, the smell of radiator fluid mixing with hot vinyl. Ruth noticed the change in his face. Something wrong? Old ghosts, he muttered. Zariah peeked over the edge of the window. Who's Lloyd? A man who used to work for my father. He hesitated, thumb still hovering over the green button. Probably about the estate. Something tied up in paperwork. Is that a bad thing? Grant didn't answer. He hit decline. For a moment, all was quiet. Then he turned to Ruth. There's something I need to ask you, and I want an honest answer. Ruth gave a small nod. Ask. Lenora, she ever say why she didn't call me? Not my father, not the house, me. We were close when we were little. Ruth didn't speak right away. She leaned against the side of the car, looking out at the trees like they'd help her find the words. She said she used to believe you were different, that you cared more about her than what the family expected her to be. But after she left, and never heard a word from you. I didn't know where she was, Grant interrupted. I know, but she thought if you really wanted to find her, you would have. That cut deeper than anything else so far. He looked over at Zariah, who was now back to squatting in the dirt, drawing something in the dust with a twig. A bird. A dove, just like the brooch. Grant sat in silence for a long while before finally speaking again. When my father died, the lawyer said there were properties that hadn't been dealt with. Stuff left behind. Some in Alabama, a couple in Louisiana, a cabin in Arkansas. Ruth's head turned slowly. Arkansas, he nodded. Said he bought it under a different name. Never told us about it. Ruth folded her arms again. Lenora mentioned a place in Arkansas, said it was the only time she ever saw him act like he wasn't trying to control everything. Took her there one summer when she was 10. She called it the Quiet House. Grant blinked. He took her? Just her? She remembered every detail, said it was the only week she felt like she was his daughter. Silence. Then Grant looked toward the horizon. What if that place still has something of hers? Something I should have known? Ruth shrugged. Only one way to find out. He turned back to Zariah. Would you come with me if I drove out there? Zariah looked up, twig still in her hand. Why? Because if it belonged to your grandmother, then maybe it belongs to you now. And maybe there's more we're both supposed to know. She stood up and dusted her knees off. Can we stop for fries first? Grant laughed, loud this time. Yes, fries first. Ruth watched them both, then stepped forward. You go out there, take it slow. Places like that carry weight. Just don't go digging unless you're ready for what you might find. I think I'm finally ready, Grant said quietly. But as he climbed back into the Mustang and turned the key, the engine coughed, then caught, and the car roared to life, like it had just woken up from a long nap, same as him. The road to Arkansas was long and empty in places, lined with trees that leaned over like old men swapping stories. Grant drove with the window cracked just enough for the wind to creep in. Zariah sat beside him, legs swinging, eyes watching the world roll by, like she'd never seen it move this fast. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Sometimes a ride can say more than 1,000 words. When they reached the cabin, small, tucked behind a cluster of sycamores, it was like time had paused. The wood was worn but standing. The screen door creaked like it remembered them. Inside, the air smelled like dust and pine. Cobwebs curled in the corners, and the furniture was covered in white sheets, like the past had been put to bed and forgotten. Grant pulled one of them off slowly. Beneath it was a rocking chair, sturdy, familiar. Zariah wandered to the window and pointed. Birdbath's broken. Grant joined her. Lenora used to feed the birds out there. Said it made her feel useful. They found a box in the back closet. It was filled with cassette tapes and sheet music, piano notes written in her careful, looping handwriting. One tape was labeled 4G, if you ever show up. He didn't cry right away. He sat with the tape in his hands for a long time. Then he played it. Her voice came through static and time, older, but still hers. Grant, I don't know if you'll ever hear this. I don't know if you'll care, but I forgave you a long time ago. I hope one day you forgive me too. Zariah leaned against his arm, her head resting there like it belonged. And in that old cabin, surrounded by echoes of a sister he lost and a girl he'd just found, Grant made a choice. No more running, no more silence. No more pretending the past didn't shape him. He would fix what he could, start small, pick her up from school, keep snacks in the glove box. Show up, because that's what mattered. Not the money, not the Mustang, not the shame. Just showing up. Life doesn't give us do-overs, but it does give us chances. Little ones, unexpected ones, in the form of a child with oil on her hands, a brooch pinned to her chest, or a tape left behind by someone who never stopped hoping. So if there's someone you haven't called, someone you left behind, maybe today's the day to show up. Not perfect, just present. Because sometimes the smallest gestures fix the biggest things.